Okay, now they're truly done. Nebraska's 2025 coaching staff is fully in place, right? We'll see.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, February 19, here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Connor Hamper, Mitch Sherman with you. So yesterday, we talked about the running back situation at Nebraska and how its coach might be courted by Texas or some other program around the country. Showed up on a hot board and sort of started a little, people got their feathers ruffled a little bit, maybe got their what's another word for that, Mitch?
It was drawing some interest. I don't know. It was a February conversation that just where there aren't a lot of these happening. It struck a nerve.
So then at just shy of 11 o'clock, I think, somewhere around there, Sean Callahan of Husker Online, I think, first reported it, that Nebraska had, introduced or showed everybody the contract of EJ Barthel, who would be back at Nebraska for the next couple of years at least, and he would be getting a significant raise based on the contract that he had before. Like, remember, part of the conversation we were having with Barthel, Nebraska's running backs coach, yesterday, was that he was the one coach in the assistant list yet that we hadn't really seen the contract yet.
Hadn't been released.
Hadn't been released, didn't get the raise, all of those things, or at least that we knew about. Now, the contract's retroactive to what, February 1st?
It's January 1st. I double checked on that this morning. So it's been written up for 6 weeks.
So it's just been sitting there, presumably, and now signed and executed, it seems. So nothing to see here. EJ Barthel's the running backs coach.
Yeah, I think generally what happens when these things get released is that they like you said, it hadn't been signed and executed. So it sounds like the ball was in EJ's court, that he had a contract offer in front of him. Now, we don't know if the terms of the contract offer changed here in the last hours, as Texas and offensive coordinator Kyle Flood, that's the connection to EJ Barthel. They were together at Rutgers about a decade ago. We don't know that didn't entice or put some pressure on Nebraska to change the offer that EJ Barthel received. Just because the contract was dated January 1 doesn't mean that all the terms were written as they appear back on January 1. So I'm not exactly sure about what happened. And in the end, it doesn't really matter. He's Nebraska's running backs coach for 2025, or he's under contract to be Nebraska's running backs coach for 2025. And he's going to receive $450,000, which is a major raise, a big pay bump over what he got the last 2 years. So he came in at $285,000, got a $8,000 raise last year in 2024, and now he's on par with Rob Dvorak. He is he's a step above salary wise, and presumably because of the experience level at Nebraska, ahead of Phil Simpson and Terry Braden, and even Phil Snow, who's given Nebraska a bargain at $400,000 to come in and be the associate head coach.
So, like you said, I think we can generally deduce that what you said was right. There's a contract, but it was understood maybe by both sides. Hey, there's some other opportunities that are out there. We'll see what those look like. And reportedly, Texas was not the only one this offseason. Penn State may have been in the conversation at some point as well. We know Barthel has East Coast ties from his time at UConn and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this confirms what we suspected and what we said on the podcast on Tuesday, that Matt Rule has wanted EJ Barthel back the whole time, that Nebraska made an offer for him to come back for 2 years. So this wasn't like the kind of deal where, he was on this probationary period and he was going to have to earn his way back because Nebraska's running backs hadn't had produced the way that, that was all kind of a fantasy. Like that's something that was concocted, I think, in the minds of some Nebraska fans, maybe some media, that EJ was in trouble at Nebraska, when you see now that there's a contract with the date of January 1st. So the ball was in his court, and he decided, maybe with a little push or a little more enticement from Matt Rule here this week, he decided to go ahead and sign that, and Nebraska released it, and it's all done. So we're in a spot now where all 13 on-field assistant coaches are locked in for the 2025 season, and we can say with some degree of certainty this is the coaching staff. But at the same time, you know how college football works, Connor, and something could come up in the spring or even in the summer, like
or July 4th weekend. Yes.
Yeah, that's not ideal. But something could come up in the spring where there's another flurry of movement. Some a head coach decides to move on, retire, go to the NFL, whatever, and you have a domino effect. Assistant coaches are on the move. The buyouts are not so large on these assistant coaching contracts that everyone's locked into place, even when they have a signed deal. So we think they're done. It looks like they're done, but something could still happen.
Yeah, no doubt. But I think it's safe to assume this is kind of what you're going to be, what you're going to be working with, and everybody who came back, and the people who were on the original staff, everybody's gotten, significant pay bumps at this period of time, and then you've been able to add like the flexibility with your ability to add coaches and bring people into the program and put them in positions where they have like really important roles. Phil Snow is one of those guys. Nebraska's really invested in their coaching staff. They have a couple $1 million coordinators. They have a tight ends coach who's making a coordinator salary, and they invested $650,000 into a special teams coordinator as well. So it's all pretty significant.
Yeah, they're now paying their assistants close to $9 million. The 13 assistant coaches you mentioned, the highest paid in that group are Holgerson at 1.2 and then John Butler at $1 million. But this speaks to the commitment.
Satterfield is the highest.
You're right. Satterfield has still got that contract as an OC. So yeah, we'll see about that and how that works out over this season. It looks like he's just going to get paid that to coach the tight ends. If he's on staff, it's hard to take money out of his pocket. This speaks to the commitment that Troy Dannon has shown to Matt Rule, and to say, okay, he came in at the beginning when Trev Alberts was the AD, and it was a younger staff, and he could have spent more on the staff than he did, but he wanted to bring in the coaches that he felt comfortable with, almost all of whom, Tony White's an exception, almost all of whom were with him at previous stops where Matt Rule was a head coach. And now you've seen a real evolution there, a change, and along with that, the amount of money, the amount of resources that are devoted to these assistant coaches has gone up considerably. And it's something that I think Nebraska fans should feel good about, because of the commitments being made to these coaches, and because Troy Dannon is clearly on board with Matt Rule paying his staff like a top half of the Big Ten coaching staff.
Yeah, it doesn't guarantee anything, but I do really like what they've done. I mean, it starts at the top. It starts with Holgerson, and then the situation I think that you've put John Butler in, and people looked at Butler and they were like, there's not enough this, there's not enough that, there's not enough success or experience or whatever it is, younger coordinator. Okay, but you've put him in an apparatus that should be able to have success, given just how Matt Rule's always had success on defense, and then Eckler. So you kind of start there, and then you trickle on down. And I think there's some recruiters here, and then I think there's some really good individual coaches as well, some Holgerson guys. I mean, it seems pretty complete at this point.
What do you think about the offensive staff in general? So you've got Holgerson at the top, you've got Da'Keel Shorts, who's his guy at wide receivers, And then there's Satterfield, Donovan Raiola, offensive line, Glenn Thomas, quarterbacks, and Barthel at running backs. Like the defensive staff has been pretty much completely remade, and this is like a mix of new and old. What's your thought on the offensive staff?
That's definitely the first thing. Like it's a hodgepodge. I think before on this podcast we've talked about like the Glenn Thomas, Marcus Satterfield, Dana Holgorsen, whatever happens, whatever that is. They'll have to kind of straighten that out a little bit. But you're right. It's a total mix and mash of but I think you could take solace in like, well, Holgorsen knew exactly, he had time to evaluate the coaches that were here before, and he was given the keys to the offense. And the change that, the change that he made was at wide receiver coach. And that's basically it.
If he wanted to do more, he could have. If he wanted another tight ends coach, if he wanted a quarterbacks coach who was different than Glenn Thomas, Dana had the autonomy to go ahead and do that, and he chose to keep these pieces.
Yep, I think that's the key part here.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk more about Nebraska football. A story that I've got out Wednesday morning on The Athletic that puts a human element to what the Huskers are doing with their roster this offseason. That's coming up next. A message right now from our sponsor, one of our sponsors, Intuit TurboTax. If you're tired of endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes, well, now that can be a thing of the past. Taxes do not have to be complicated or stressful, and TurboTax is here to change the game for you by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers, no more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20 forms, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on the progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Welcome back. Tuesday edition of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. It's still cold outside. It's not baseball weather yet. It's the Husker baseball team's headed to Louisiana. They were home for like 48 hours, or they will be home for about 48 hours. No more snow on the way. It's going to get warm. Are you enjoying the double-digit below zero mornings? We've got 2 more of these, maybe 3 to come this week.
One of the things that I always like to do when there's warm weather on the horizon and there's horrible weather in front of you is I like to taunt the weather, like enjoy your time now. It's not going to be like this in a week. However, I don't feel the need to do that this time around, knowing that we are still in the danger zone here. It's February and then it'll be March and anything could happen in those months. So I'm not ready to taunt it on the way out. I'm not ready to wave goodbye. Not ready to say 2 rings like Dan Hurley yet. I'm just going to keep calm and enjoy whatever good weather we get.
You taunt it by like going outside in shorts and a t-shirt when it's 8 below zero with a -26 wind chill.
I look from inside my window. I look longingly outside, and I say, and I just kind of shake my head. And the weather knows. They could feel the presence. They could feel my glares.
I'm wary of this supposed warm up that we're going to get. Like it's going to be in the 50s next week. I feel like they're lying to us. Like it can't be possible. It's not going to happen. We're not going to be outside without jackets in like 4 days, 5 days. It can't actually.
Feels fake.
I mean, it's fake. Exactly. All right. As we continue to ponder that, I've got a story out this morning on The Athletic that gives some insight into what's been happening behind the closed doors of the Nebraska football complex. Nebraska's got to reduce its roster from 150 last season to 105 in the 2025 season, and do that while adding what is so far 36 and counting newcomers. So the reality is, Connor, a lot of players have to leave. A lot of them are a lot of those players who are leaving are at Nebraska for the reasons that makes Nebraska Nebraska.
Yep.
They possess the qualities that fans have come to love over the generations, and we've been hearing about this. We've been talking about it. Back in December, Matt Rule mentioned that he and his staff had been having meetings or were planning meetings with every player on the roster to let them know if they would, where they stood on the 105. Are you in and are you out if Nebraska had to make the cuts right now? And many of the players who were told they'd be out and some others left. They entered the transfer portal, and some of them said no. They said, I want to stay. I want to be here until you tell me to pack my bags. And hopefully that day doesn't come. Nebraska has until kickoff on August 28th or one day before that, whatever the rule says. It has until the first game to get down to 105. One of those players who was told he would not be on the 105 if the decision was being made in December was Conor Connealy. He is a defensive lineman out of Elkhorn Mount Michael, has not played in a game in 2 seasons at Nebraska. You may recognize the name. His dad, Terry Connealy, was a 2-time all-conference defensive lineman and a captain of the 1994 Huskers, Tom Osborne's first national championship season. So Connor is all in on Nebraska. He told the coaches that after the Iowa game.
If you could build a guy who's all in on Nebraska in a lab, this is probably him.
Mm-hmm. He planned to work hard, earn his spot on the 105, said this is going to be a motivating factor. I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to prove people wrong. And then a few days later, he tore his ACL in bowl practice as Nebraska started to get ready for the Pinstripe Bowl. This was a game that Conor Connealy thought that he had a chance to play in because of all the attrition on the defensive line. He had surgery in January. He still wants to stay. And in a strange twist, he may have actually bought himself another year because of the injury. His diagnosis is 12 to 15 months out. This is the second time he's torn that ACL, did it in high school as a senior. And Nebraska can replace an injured player who's out for the season on the 105 and keep that injured player in some role. We don't know exactly what role that would be. Can they eat with the team? Can they watch film? Can they go to practice? NCAA hasn't said, but they don't have to count on the 105. So what an odd situation that you could get injured and buy yourself more time on the 105, especially when you're a person in the position of someone like Conor Connealy, who wants so badly to be a part of Nebraska football in any way. Doesn't care about NIL, doesn't care about rev share, just wants to be there, wants to be on the scout team. Yeah.
First of all, thank you, NCAA, for your your great guidance on all of these things. It's been great to completely and totally understand all this, both from a fan perspective and from a player coach
perspective.
Players don't know. Right, exactly. So, I mean, it's really fascinating because what you highlighted in the story was Conor Connealy is trying to be one of the people who gets those final 10 roster spots that Rule talked about. The 95 to 105, the guys who just bleed Husker, and basically are walk-ons. But they're versatile practice players, who really want to be here and understand the culture and are great in that regard. It's an easy decision if you have a star player or, a guy in his freshman year or something like that who tears his ACL in practice. You're going to keep that guy on the roster and you're going to put that guy on the whatever they're going to call it, the IL, the DL, the injured reserve, whatever it might be. Like it's easy, but this is also really competitive for those spots as well. It's competitive for the final 10 roster spots. And I would imagine that Nebraska will have a full slate of injured reserve players.
Yeah, you don't know if there's going to be a limit on that. We have no idea if it's you can have 4 or 5 players. I mean, teams would presumably abuse that if given the opportunity. So the NCAA might put a limit on it, and there might not even be a spot on the injured reserve. We don't even know if the injured reserve is a thing for sure. Yeah. It's just been speculated.
Yeah, it's a tough story. And I don't know. Like I kind of feel like he's the kind of guy who, if he doesn't get hurt in bowl practice, he might be. I don't know if he's better off, but it definitely buys him more time. But it really You did a great job with this, Mitch, and it definitely puts a face to the things that we've been talking about. And it's the perfect guy to highlight. There's probably a handful of players on Nebraska's roster who are exactly like this without the torn ACL at the moment.
Right. And then they're very worried right now. You know, they are going to try to do whatever they can in the weight room and in practice. And there's urgency in this spring and even in the mat drills that Nebraska is going to be starting to impress upon the coaches that they're deserving of one of the final 10 spots, because it's probably not going to work if you're someone who's not played in a game for 2 years to get into that top 95. Your only real hope until you become someone who's in the 2 deep or the 3 deep is to get into the last 10. And honestly, I think you probably have to bring some value potentially in a football game to even make the last 10. Like, you have to be somebody who can contribute on special teams. Maybe there's 1 or 2 guys who are there solely because of their attitude and the instinct, whatever. I mean, he Conor Connealy,
It's gonna come down to numbers.
It's hard
right?
to even put into words.
Yeah.
He talks about, you know, you can read the article. He talks about how he grew up and his first memories of Memorial Stadium, you know, what his bedroom looked like as a kid. Do you have 1 or 2 spots for that guy, even if he's not playing? I don't know.
It's going to come down to numbers and what you have. He also mentioned at the end, you know, he's not sure what he would do if he was told that he couldn't play at Nebraska. Would he just stop? Would that be it for his football career? You know, he said he wanted to play football, but he really wanted to be at Nebraska and play football. So, this is the story for a lot of people, not just at Nebraska, but around the country, I think.
Yeah, this is definitely something that is happening on other campuses, and it's more pronounced at Nebraska because you have a bigger roster and you have players like this who've been celebrated for decades at Nebraska. You want to come here, you want nothing else but to just be at Nebraska. He was prepared to be a student at Nebraska. I won't spoil everything about the story, but he was prepared to be a student at Nebraska and not play football before Matt Rule's coaching staff reached out to him in the spring of his senior year. So go check that out on The Athletic. Let me know what you think. And, you know, we'll try to find some more of those stories as the offseason goes along and Nebraska gets closer to having to be at that 105 number.
All right, let's take a break. Coming up tonight, Big Ten basketball from State College, Pennsylvania, after this. All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. It is Wednesday. Don't forget to get your questions in for the mailbag coming up on Friday. We need you to get your mailbag questions in before Friday because we tape the Friday show on Friday. So get them in like today or like immediately or Thursday at the very latest. That's your public service announcement. Nebraska basketball back tonight at Penn State after a thrilling, some would call it maybe unnecessarily thrilling win at Northwestern on Sunday. They'll go to a sleepy Bryce Jordan Center in Pennsylvania. Penn State has not had the year that they have wanted this year, but it generally hasn't been a very successful program anyway. They have now lost 7 games in a row. They're 3-12 in the league. They're 13-13 overall, but you're guilty by association in your conference. So when you look at the net rankings, it says 80 by Penn State. And if you beat Penn State on the road, you have an opportunity to say that you have a good win on your slate. So it's an important one for Nebraska.
Why is Penn State a 1.5 point favorite in this game? From
I
our
don't
friends
know.
at FanDuel?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me look at some of the analytics. So Nebraska is a 1 point on KenPom. It says Nebraska by 1 at this point. So it's basically right in that toss-up zone.
Yeah, the ESPN matchup predictor gives Nebraska a 50.4% chance to win. They're really looking at this as very much a toss-up. I mean, clearly 1.5 points on the line. That's you can view that as a pick 'em. feel like Nebraska should win this game. And I know Penn State has been playing teams close, but Penn State's lost 5 of its last 6 at home. In addition to that extended losing streak
don't you think it could be just like a lack of trust in Nebraska? Like, we don't know what we're going to get from this group. Ride the roller coaster.
Actually, you kind of know what you're going to get at this point. The way that Nebraska comes out and plays, you're going to get a roller coaster. You're going to get
half and one horrendous half, whatever that would be.
Yeah. They need to do Fred Hoiberg a favor and come out with energy tonight. It's a bring your own energy, create your own energy kind of game at the Bryce Jordan Center. I don't imagine Penn State with this kind of skid that the Nittany Lions are on are going to have anything that even resembles a crowd tonight in State College. It's a 5:30 tip, 6:30 Eastern. So it's an earlier tip on BTN. They're last in the Big Ten.
No,
get it, Nebraska.
This might be the worst one. I mean, Washington and Oregon, those were pretty rough, but this will be as bad as a crowd as you've played in front of in a non-tournament setting all year, like in conference play.
Yeah, Washington looked like a high school arrangement. Oregon was a good environment.
The difficult part about Penn State is that the building is big. It's made for hockey. It's a big cavernous building. And Nebraska said there's struggles there over the years, but nobody's ever there. And so it could be sort of complicated for really both teams, honestly, to play in. So yeah, Nebraska's going to have another one of those games where they sort of have to bring their own juice here. And, can you trust them to do it is just one of those things that we've been pondering over the last couple of weeks here.
No Berke Buchtenschel tonight. He's home in Lincoln. Fred Hoiberg talked on Tuesday about the decision to leave him home, and they feel like he's making progress. He's been back on the court, but they didn't want to take him on the road and potentially lead to a setback because he was away from some of the treatments that he's able to get at home. So he's with a trainer back in Lincoln and presumably can get healthy and be a part of things for Nebraska's return home this weekend. It is a big opportunity. Nebraska had the chance against Maryland last weekend to get to 500 in the league and couldn't do it. And now you go on the road and you got a chance to get to 500 in the league against the last place team. So it seems on paper to be much more manageable. But again, that's not how the games play out. I think, I'll say what I said before that Maryland game. I think getting to that place, getting to 500, the 6-game losing streak that Nebraska had is out of mind at this point. That's a ways in the past. Yeah. But getting to 500, I think would be great for the psyche of this team and give them the fuel that they need to push this thing into March.
Well, we know,
continue to play well.
Excuse me. We know how important the psyche is. Like, that matters with this group. So, yes, I feel like it would represent some sort of a clean slate, a fresh start. You'd get back to 8-8 with a win, and then a real chance to shoot your shot in the last 4 with a game against Michigan, who's sitting at the top of the league right now at home on Monday
night. Yeah.
Minnesota, that's a can't lose it game at home. You want to get back against Ohio State, even though you beat them at home. That would be a really quality win on the road. And then you owe Iowa to finish off the season. So yeah, I think, Nebraska, if they get back to 500, they could sort of look forward instead of trying to claw their way back up the mountain. They could end that sort of journey upwards and just say, okay, we've arrived at some sort of a stopping point here. Let's go forward now.
I'm with you. 8-8 would be a fantastic place to be going into the last game of February. Yeah, Monday night at Pinnacle Bank Arena. No weekend game for the Huskers on the schedule, so that's an extra day for Berke Buchtenschel to get healthy. An extra day and a half. Monday 7:00 tip at PBA against a ranked team. It seems like just an ideal spot for Nebraska to be in. Like you said, going into the last 4, 3 of those last 4 are at home. You finish with Iowa, a team that you really feel like you owe something after the way that loss sent Nebraska into a tailspin in Iowa City last month. So there's a lot ahead for this Nebraska basketball team for sure to accomplish over the last 4 games, and it starts tonight. Huskers got to get it done. They have to go in and take care of business at a place where it's not all that easy to do, despite the record that Penn State brings in. So big opportunity for Fred Hoiberg. We hope that they can do this without him having to break anything in the locker room.
Yes, or his hand or anything like that. Quickly before we go, just a quick look at like the tournament adjacent stuff. So on the bracket matrix, which is just an accumulation of all the brackets. Now these update as the day goes along, and we're recording this in the morning, so maybe it'll adjust a little bit throughout the day. Nebraska currently a 9 seed on the bracket matrix. Once again, and just an accumulation of all the bracketologists. There's 104 brackets out there at this point. Nebraska's in every single one of them. But I was taking a look at some of the other teams that are like just in the neighborhood. Kansas got beat last night at BYU. I don't think they're going to fall all the way down to that area, but
Probably should.
It's fascinating sort of what their situation is. Oregon is in the general neighborhood. 2-time defending national champion UConn is in the neighborhood. Creighton is in the neighborhood. Gonzaga is in the neighborhood. Some teams in the Big Ten like Texas, West Virginia is in the neighborhood, right? San Diego State, like there's just some heavy hitters who are going to be sitting right at that back edge of the top 25, like 25 to 36, kind of in the rankings and the seed list there. And Nebraska is right in the thick of that. So you would like to separate yourself a little bit from that pack if you at all could. If you could dream of getting up to like a 7 seed and avoiding the 8, 9, because there's a lot. And then you, of course, if you win, you play a 1. So like there's still a lot of massaging and maneuvering that's on the table here for the
I feel like that would almost take winning out for Nebraska to get past the 8-9 line.
Yeah.
Not winning out in the regular season and then do whatever in the Big Ten tournament. If you can somehow win the last 5 and go 12-8 in the league, then I think that would do it. But I'm not sure that anything short of that, like 11-9, let's say you win out but lose at Ohio State, I don't know that gets you higher than the 8-9 seed. Let's not have Nebraska in one of these old Big 12 games that we reminisce about. Like I don't want to see Nebraska Kansas or we got Nebraska Texas A&M last year and don't want to see Nebraska Texas. Did you say Texas is in that area, or Texas is better than that, right?
Texas is on the 10 line right now.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, very much in that area.
UConn, not the team you want to see in the first round, but Nebraska and UConn have played before in the first round of the tournament, and you know how that went because Nebraska's never won a tournament game. That was that a Danny Nee, Jim Calhoun meeting? I believe it was. So,
wow. Yeah. So there's a lot to sort out here, but Nebraska feels comfortable about where they're at right now. And don't lose games that you're not supposed to. And tonight, I know they're underdogs, but it wouldn't feel great if they lost it. Okay. That is it for us today on the show. Once again, get those mailbag questions in before Friday, and appreciate you making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, you could check out Locked On Big Ten, where Craig puts the Big Ten first. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.